All right, good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Please come in. We're welcome to Program Development Lab Workshop for Illinois Access to Justice. If that's what you're looking for, you're in the right place. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting to get started. Hope you are enjoying our music this morning. Our music is selection. That's by Anderson Paak. Lockdown. It was suggested to us by Nebula Lee from Indo-American Center. So great theme. This was apparently a really popular song during this lockdown period, during the rebellion period. So check that out, Anderson Paak. And we thank you for all of your suggestions. So hopefully you're in the right place. Program Development Lab Workshop. This is the follow-up from the Program Development Workshop, giving you the kind of broad concepts of everything. And today we're going to go a little deeper. Again, we're the Civic Lab. We're a Black-led 501c3 organization. We're out here recruiting, developing, and equipping new leaders. The Access to Justice program is this great program that brings us all together. And so that's why we are here. And we're really excited about being part of this. And thanks for the participation in all this. Please check out our information on our Power Institute. Put that that link right there is for you. It's going to be in our chat. You can get a wealth. There's a wealth of information about how to do everything about community organizing and campaign, all the nuts and bolts toolkits that you need to make your work more effective. So please check out the Power Institute. Today, our trainers for today are Alma Johnson, myself, Phillip Thomas, and Tom Tresser, our fearless leader. Alma, unfortunately, will be with us in spirit. We're having some technical difficulties there, but she is instrumental in putting together our presentation today and our workshop. And we really thank her for all of her fantastic work. It's just wasn't working out technology-wise today. So we're ready to go. And we got good stuff for you, a lot of interactive stuff for us all to kind of really get deep into the subject matter. We're going to really discuss this program idea, what it is, go into the elements of what a program is in the life cycle briefly. We're going to, again, do this checklist for doing or not doing a new program or continuing a program. And then we're going to break and come back. And we've got some really interesting small group and exercises that we could go through that really make this a lab more than just a general workshop. We want to really get your involvement, and it's going to be fun. So no one should feel intimidated about talking about things or volunteering in this session. It all should be great. And we're going to do the evaluation at the end, so make sure that you fill those out for us. So to let you know where we are, we've been discussing the elements of a healthy nonprofit, and the nonprofit is a particular kind of critter animal. And so we've got to understand it from its inception throughout its whole life cycle. And today we're going to send the discussion of program development is centered in the area having to do with planning, technology, and administration. So that's where we are, and that's our starting point conceptually. Next slide, please.
Okay, Tom Tresser here. Good morning, everybody. Beautiful people doing justice in Illinois. So here's the question. What is a program? Put it into chat or unmute yourself, shout it out. When I say program, what do you mean? What comes to your mind? What is a program? What is a program? What is a program? Yeah, Kristen, delivering service. Can you speak to that, please? Unmute and tell us what you mean.
Well, when you're delivering a service, you have a goal in mind of like what you're offering. So in my program, I supervise a home visiting program. So we provide home visiting services. And I think a lot of stuff can fall underneath that. But the big picture is that we're delivering something to a family. So we're providing visits, doing screenings and things like that.
Awesome. So let's dissect that a little bit. If I had to sort of go down to the nuclear level there, I would say people doing something specific for somebody. Nebula put in a specific target population. It's the same idea. Somebody has a need for something, and this is a response. Other thoughts? I say program, you say what?
Program.
And put it into chat or just shout it out. Okay, I would say tangible benefit. Exactly. Activities towards a particular goal. Yep. So that implies some pre-thinking, doesn't it? It's to be a program, I would say, requires pre-planning, and it's a response to a need. Yes, would you agree? And it requires some training to deliver. Yes, and measuring. So for reporting, right? And I would then say if there's some kind of evaluation. So in the case of the home visits, I would imagine you just don't take anyone off the street and send them into someone's home, right? They must be trained and vetted properly. And what do they do when they go to the person's home? They can't do everything. Are they going to give the person a haircut? No, there's specific things that are on the table, as it were, as a result of that home visit. And then when that home visit is concluded, is there not some report, or let's call it after action, so that the organization has a good picture of all these home visits? And then do we not check with the client, with the with our constituent, like how'd it go? Did this meet your needs? It did? Awesome. Oh, it didn't quite? Well, we need to know that as well. So the other thing that I think we need to say here is that it's connected to the mission. And that sounds like an obvious statement, but we want to remind us that everything we do always comes back to the mission of the organization. And we said in earlier sessions that mission is your guide star, is your North Star. And your organization may be pulled upon to do many things. I mean, people have many needs. We're complex beings, of course, and these are tough times. And so you may be a legal organization doing legal services, but a client or constituent may need money, right, to pay the rent, but you don't have the money in your budget, though you may feel a need or a response that is actually something that your client needs, but we can't do everything. Okay. Anybody else want to add anything about what is a program? What is a program? And you can also put into chat, I would like you to put into chat specific examples of programs that your organization offers. We've already heard one of home visits. Please put into chat now specific programs your organizations offers.
I would like to share. My name
Yeah.
is Teresa. I'm with Logan Espanol Association. I'm working with the departmental program. So as it say, it's a program that the purpose is to support the students in the classroom. So we encourage parents from the schools to be part of the departmental program. So that is one of the services that we have at LSNA. So beside others, an example, community navigators and housing promoters. So our goal is to help our community, and not in short, say in term, but it's a long term. And they participate at the school. An example, the paramentors participate at the school for 2 hours every day. So when they complete 100 hours, they receive a stipend. So that is one of the services that we have at LSNA, and it's my best example to share with
Great.
you.
Thank you so much.
That's a great example.
Nebula has also put into the chat immigration legal services. I think that is something that is very common across our crew here today. Tricia says also direct legal services. So again, it sounds obvious, but certainly the people who are providing those services have to know the law. They may not necessarily be lawyers, but they've got to be oriented on the immigration law system and as it rapidly changes. So we're in an environment where we had one presidential administration doing very harsh measures, and now we have a new presidential administration in some ways trying to undo, or are they moving fast enough? So there's lots of information moving through the system to make sure that we're giving our people the correct information. So all these things that we're speaking of here are parts and components of what we will call a program. So here are some elements, I think, that again, it just bears repeating that are needed in order to successfully deliver one of these things that we're calling a program. Well, there's materials. So there are materials that the program delivery person might use to give to the client. So those have to be created. But there are also training materials that obviously the client does not see, but that the deliverer, the program officer, the program staff was used to train. And those could be case stories, there could be legal documents, there could be demographic information about your neighborhoods. This would be all sorts of things that the client will never see, but we're required in order to make that program efficient and effective. Any marketing materials. So how does your constituent even know that you have this program, right? I mean, if you give a party and no one comes, that's no good. So somehow the people that you desire to serve have to know that you are here and ready to go. Now, those can be flyers, those can be announcements in the church. They could be people on the street with T-shirts. They could be on the radio. There's so many ways, emails, and of course, word of mouth. Somebody had a good interaction with you, and they will tell their friends. And you can even give clients little palm cards in Spanish, English, other languages that they could share with their friends. So you can turn your clients and your constituents into, I guess you could say, collaborators. If you give them, say, little business cards, that would be saying, like, you know, pass these out to your neighbors, to the people you work with. How much does this thing cost? So, you know, there's obviously the cost of the staff person. So that's a cost to the organization. And that includes the cost of training them. So if you hire me for your organization and I don't have the skills or I don't have the knowledge, you got to maybe work with me for a week or 2 weeks before I can do my training and to go out into the community. So that those 2 weeks would be part of the cost. I'm being paid. And then, of course, I go into the field. Then the cost of any materials, if you're leaving flyers or if your website needs to be expanded to speak of these services, these are costs to the organization. What obstacles might you think are in the way of you delivering a good program? I'll put that in the chat. You can chime in or put into the chat. What gets in the way of delivering a good service, of making a good program happen? Funding. Yes, language access, 2 key points. Staffing. Susana, could you speak to the funding piece? Say a little more about that, if you would. If you can, Susana.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. Yeah. Yes. So funding, as an example, with our youth program, one of the fundings is that we could apply to is if you get a student, because it's academic support. If you get a student with a F, they're expecting you to, at the end of the school or to get an A, right? To move on into grades. However, that funding doesn't take in consideration the different levels of that everyone learns in a different way, and going more towards like a goal mindset. So in that way, we as organization don't want to apply to that funding because of the the expectations that they have and the type of community that we work with or youth that we work with. Because we do have youth that have IEPs, which are individual education plans, or for example, another one was applying for funding that would not allow us to distribute condoms in other programs, right? So it was like, but we have an HIV and education, HIV and STDs, education prevention program. So it overlaps with, other programs. And so that's what I was meaning about funding.
Wow. Thank you. That's awesome.
Loaded.
Yeah. So
That's a loaded example.
All right. So let's dwell on that for a moment. Our funders, we love them, we hate them. It's a complex relationship. On the one hand, I think you could fairly say they exist to serve us, right? Funders are in the business of sending money into the field to do the work that you're doing, but we know it's a little more complicated and nuanced than that. The funders have their own worlds, and sometimes, at least from the Civic Lab's point of view, they get a little pleased with themselves. And they do set up all sorts of barriers and hoops that you have to jump through. And sometimes I think we feel they're a little removed from the streets, if you follow me. And they set up their own expectations, like you said, Susana, and that it doesn't really jive with what is happening in the real world. But that's the deal. So if you want their money, you gotta, dance to their dance. And so sometimes, as I think she said, we chose not to avail ourselves of that pot of money, and which is too bad because we need more money to do our jobs. There's no doubt about it. And so that's a big problem. Then language access. Farouz, can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, I think we often run into challenges when we design programs or even events, and we don't have interpreters or don't have information that is translated in different languages. And then, the program can just end right there if you don't have a way to communicate with your constituents.
Exactly. And again, suppose your community changes and people move in from a different part of the world that have a different language or maybe even a different dialect of the language that you're used to doing and working with in your organization, because the world is changing. It's such a turmoil out there that people are flooding into America, moving around with great rapidity. And so it could be that all of a sudden there's a different population in your area that has a different language that you're familiar with. So that, again, how fast can you respond? Is there someone in your world who you can hire or bring into the organization who does speak that language and knows the different ways and cultural norms, so that you're welcoming and not causing problems? Huge issue. And again, do our funders appreciate that? Back to the earlier question. Do they appreciate how rapidly our world is changing and how we might need rapid funds very quickly to adapt to our situation? These are very real barriers. No clear deadlines. Lorena, could you explain what you meant by that? No clear deadlines.
Yes, good morning, everyone. And what I meant by clear deadlines is just if you don't have a strong foundation for your project or some sort of like project management technique, so many other tasks can really interfere, and before you know it, time has passed and you're now behind on your program or on your project. So I think setting really clear milestones or benchmarks is a really strong way to keep yourself on track and to keep your team who's assisting you on track as well.
Oh boy, such a great insight. So program management means a few things. We've already talked about data and record keeping. And the last point on my slide you'll see is tracking usage and evaluation. Again, the need is so pressing out there that we may be overwhelmed by the need to serve our people, right? To do one more call, to take another case, to make another home visit, to, you know what I'm saying? To just keep going. But if you don't keep good records, we will defeat ourselves in the long run. Where, first of all, our funders, including the state of Illinois, is going to require us to keep good, clear, and consistent records. But also, as I'm telling you, for our own internal purposes, we've got to know what we've done and how we've done it. And so, yes, having your paperwork, having your protocols down is so key, so that your organization cannot overpromise and underdeliver or be swamped by the need out there. And so project management tools, people use different things. Sometimes it's just a spreadsheet, some that's shared by the different people of the program. So they're all checking in and putting in their hours or their caseloads or other that. But there's also more sophisticated tools that I know that are out there that are secure, and no one can just get in there and see a client's information. But whatever tool you're using, key point, because you're going to have to report on monthly, quarterly, semi-annual basis, and you want to have all that information handy. It's so hard to try to recreate things after the fact. In other words, you've got a report due, say, for a funder, and you're being asked to compile your documents for the last quarter, and you just didn't have time to do it. Now you're crunched. You know what I'm saying? So yes, I know record keeping is not necessarily what we signed up for, when we came into this work, for sure. But that's the reality of delivering a good sound program, is having our records in good order. Okay, I think
can I just say one thing about that, Tom?
Yes, sir.
The evaluation tracking data stuff is also tied to when you're making a decision, as people are saying, about whether even to do the program. Because when you actually have to look at the level of data and what you're keeping, that'll tell you a lot about whether or not it's aligned with your mission, actually.
Right, and that's a point we're going to make in a minute about ending programs. So I think the implication of our work so far in discussing programs and discussing funding and other things that we've talked about in our trainings as implied that we're about starting stuff, and keeping things going for sure. But we want to introduce in this training the notion of ending something. All right, so let's talk about that. So there's sort of like a life cycle that we think that we can describe when we talk about this program development business. There's an initial need. So it could be that your organization was trundling along very well, and something happens, and it's called to your attention that our students of our clients are not doing well in school because of this, that, and the other thing. And so that leads you to the schoolroom, and then you investigate and you decide, you know what, maybe we need a homework help. We need some kind of tutoring program. That's not what we started out to do, but it seems that unless we have our youth stable in the school, it will not be well for the family. So let's do that. So there's that initial moment of recognition of a need that hadn't been articulated that leads to the planning. So you're thinking about, well, how do we enter the classroom? How do we need to talk to the principal? Do we need materials in Spanish and English and Arabic, or all the things that are happening in that initial phase when you're trying to figure out how do we enter into this new area? What are the requirements? Well, if it's going to be a homework situation, we got to know what's being taught in the classroom, right? What's the grade level? So these are the things that you're doing in the analysis program, the analysis part. What are we producing for these? So are we doing a website for these kids? No, or it's a booklet? Is it worksheets? Are we asking them to come to a different space after the school, at some other location where there'll be a little quiet area for them? What's the best way to deliver this homework help? Are we going to assign a one-on-one so each child gets a tutor? Is that the way to go? And it'll be sort of like via Zoom. These are all the things that you're thinking about as you're designing the program. What is the costs? And then you have an idea of how you should deliver this new program, and you give it a go. Somebody has to be the first one. Some child, in the case of the home of the tutoring program, is going to be the first child to receive the tutoring, and some tutor is going to be the first tutor to actually deliver this service for your organization. How'd it go from both sides? Some thought has to be cared to, like, well, what we call iteration. Design it in phases. So you try it, you quickly review it, you adjust, and you keep going. So that's kind of what we call the testing and evaluation phase. And you see the circle, it keeps sort of going around in the circle. So you're never 100% done, as it were. Even a good program can be tweaked, right? You get a new idea, your client has some new thoughts, and you go, you know what, maybe we should change that the way we do that homework worksheet. Let's put a different example in. So even that is an example of how a very successful program can evolve over time, and someone needs to be in charge of that. So if you're the tutor who's in the classroom or delivering the tutoring to the children, you have to report to your boss, to your manager, as well as to your fellow trainers. So there's a sense that the program deliverers are in communication with one another. So you're sharing with each other best practices formally and informally. As we move through time, you can see how this cycle works. So even a very good, solid program that is very effective and much appreciated can be improved. Are any thoughts or reactions to this notion of this cycle? Has anyone experienced this with the continuous improvement of a good program? Something that's been working well, but it still can be improved. Anybody has an example? Something that caused a good program to be even better.
Well, speaking, I guess I can go.
Sure.
Speaking from Spanish Community Center, we have a grant that we received from DCFS for our family advocacy program. And then one of the things that we noticed is that, especially during the pandemic, this became fairly evident that we didn't have enough resources in the area for mental health, specifically for Spanish-speaking clients. So what we did is that we actually partnered with psychologists from Mexico, a couple of them, to provide mental health services, but more on a limited scope. And we refer to them as life coaching as a way to kind of address that issue. And then we were able to receive additional funding to cover the costs. And obviously, because we're not located in the same area, it was done via telehealth. So I think we were able to, I guess it's not a permanent solution, but with the clients that were coming in, typically the answer was, well, we don't have anything in the area. You don't have insurance. Obviously, it's too expensive to pay out of pocket. So this was our way of remedying the situation. And it has helped to some extent. Many of them are able to continue past the initial 8 weeks. So now we're looking to find funding to hopefully get a psychologist or a therapist in-house. But this is the way we've been navigating that. And that was supplementing the additional services that we were already providing in that program.
Awesome example. So again, what that demonstrates for me is the nimble thinking in our world. In our world of providing services to real human beings in crisis every day, we show evidence of what I would call nimble thinking, quick responses. We don't need a whole study. You know, we don't need to hire a consultant to come in and tell us what to do. We understand the needs of our people, as you demonstrated and said, well, how can we respond quickly? Do we have someone in the house who can speak Spanish and do these certain services? No, we don't. So what do we do? What do we do? Let's connect with our colleagues in Mexico. And you created this new solution, as you say, using telemedicine, and you found funding for it. So that was a quick response. And we know this happens over and over and over again in our field. And I think we take it for granted, or perhaps we are taken for granted, but that is a strong marker of what we do and why we are so valuable. So you were able to respond quickly, real time. And as you said, it may not be permanent, but it suggests something. So again, we're inventors. So that's why we put the test tubes in our graphics. You guys are like real-time inventors with your people, with your colleagues, to create something from nothing as you respond to the human needs that are placed before us. Let's see now. Nebula put into the chat, one of our improvements was moving from numbers-based to funding that is more focused on quality. Can you speak to that, please? That's very yeasty. What do you mean by that, Nebula? Oh, you're muted. You can unmute.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So some funders require just a case for other folks who do legal services. I'm at Indo-American Center and we do immigration legal services. Some funders require just that you have submitted the application form and then they look for the outcome. So it's completely numbers based. It doesn't take into consideration that some folks have more complicated legal cases that take more time and energy. For example, a client who has a disability, a client who has a legal guardian due to like mental disability, clients with complicated criminal history, et cetera. Those cases take longer, but those folks are equally worthwhile, right, for submitting their applications. So we've started to look for, to diversify how we fund this department so that we can spend more quality time basically on clients rather than just trying to churn out as many cases as possible, and to find funders that value that time spent basically. Previously, we had just completed the form and then the attorney's job was done once it was filed. Now we actually represent someone all the way to the conclusion of their case. So those are some improvements.
Yeah, I would say it's a major adjustment of services. So again, through real lived experience with the client, with the people you serve, with this dance with the funders, that again is proving a help and a hindrance. You know, I wish it were otherwise. We're going to spend a lot of time in the next series of workshops discussing funding and you know, the blessings and the curses therein. But that's for another time. But I think
Well, can I just, as a recovering funder,
go ahead.
let me just interject that this is an opportunity actually for you to educate your funders about elements and aspects that you're dealing with in real life that they aren't. And I've seen organizations, not instantly, but over time, influence the way funders might think about particular things, particularly as others echo the same message. So I always think that you all are the front line of everything having to do this, and you have a great education role to play to the foundation, the funder side of things.
Right. Well, we're gonna circle back to that key point when we discuss funding in greater detail in March. But
Absolutely.
But for now, I think you've made the point of lifting up the real experience of your people, and in that case, you were able to find the funder and adjust your delivery in such a way that the end result is the people you're serving have a better experience. As you say, it's more comprehensive. You're looking at the client or your case in a more comprehensive, realistic way. They're just not a person with a language problem or an immigration problem, or they stubbed their toe or whatever the case may be. They're human beings with full lives, and you're trying to adjust and serve as best you can in a more comprehensive and holistic manner. And that's an awesome story.
It really is.
I would just like to say one more thing about this little circle here. Each point on the circle, you know, is a place to dwell a little bit in a more comprehensive way if we had a little more time to talk about, for example, you know, staffing. You know, we might dwell on the little arrow that says requirements, for example, and spend more time in discussing, well, what kind of people should you be hiring? You know, what are their requirements? Do they need a degree? Do they need certifications, et cetera, et cetera? But you get the picture that when we move around this cycle, it implies many other things that the organization has to attend to. When we talk about deployment, you know, we're implying some things like, as I mentioned earlier, marketing. So if you've got a homework tutoring program ready to go, how do you let the world know about that? Who's in charge of that? To let, say, guidance counselors know about it, or youth service workers, or even, I don't know, even policemen maybe. So to be imaginative about, okay, we have a good program, we have the staff ready to deliver said program. We know where we are. We're in Pilsen. We're in Rockford, wherever we're located. We know all that. It's just the people don't know about us. So how do we get the word out? So each one of these little points of the arrows implies a few more things that we simply don't have time to go into. But we thought this was a good start. Okay, back to you, Phil.
I thought that was an excellent way of understanding this life cycle. So the context of program development or program evaluation, then we've had to make decisions as decision makers, and whether or not to do a program or not to do it, no go or go. And that is what the program strategy map that we referenced earlier in the earlier presentation lets us do at a glance. We're saying that we're looking at financial stability, we're looking at our preparedness, our understanding of what we do and how we do our programs, and then we're looking at alignment of mission. And often as we're discussing, the impetus for us to think about the change can be external in terms of our community. It could be from the funders themselves, either government or a foundation or some other funder can be the reason why we're thinking about going into a direction. And in that way, we have to make sure that we are on that other axis of alignment. If our starting point of thinking is the revenue. On the flip side, if the starting point is something that we think is a good extension of our mission, we've got to make sure that it's sustainable, not only just in terms of money, in terms of revenue coming in, but also the way we use our current resources, our staff, all of our resources. So ultimately, we use all of the data that we've been talking about so that we can plug it in and figure out which of these quadrants we're in. And so what we're going to do later in the second half of this is go through all these and be able to use this tool. Use it both in terms of the life cycle, if we're at the beginning of that program development life cycle, or if we're at the point where we're evaluating it and reevaluating it and understanding if we're going to go further. So next slide. So as we talked about before, then what we're doing in this analysis, we're doing what's very similar to if you have a business and you're doing a business plan, you want to start out with this broad conceptual, let's call it a meta framework, a meta frame that allows us to evaluate this opportunity that we have, this program, the program that we're thinking about developing. And we can, again, at a glance, kind of put the data that we're going to collect in boxes based on the answers that we come from the questions that we're asking ourselves. And that will guide us and give us at a glance look at what we ought to do and what the major elements of it are. So when we talk about our strengths, we're talking about our advantages in doing this program that we're considering. And when we talk about our weaknesses, we're talking about what is missing. What are the things that maybe we would have to partner with an organization to do, or things we just currently really don't have the capacity to do that stand in the way of maybe doing this program. You've heard some of those in the examples we've been talking about. The opportunities are not only just around generally around maybe the funding opportunity that we have by doing the program, but how that might actually extend our current mission and as in the case it was just said, serve our clients more comprehensively. That could be considered the opportunity that we see in front of us in this program. It might not even just be the funding, but it's like with the programming, we can do something that is much more aligned because it's comprehensively dealing with our mission and our clients' needs. And then threats are the things where you're at risk, where this may extend you beyond what you're understanding. But actually, there are two different kinds of threats. There are the threats you know about and can identify, and then there's the threats you don't know about, and then there's the threats you don't know that you don't know about. I mean, it's threats are this thing that maybe are even more coming to more relief when you're evaluating an existing program, because then you've kind of seen things and you understand the threats in a more realistic way. So to review what I'm saying, Tom, could you go up to the previous slide? After you've done that SWOT analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, that gives you an understanding of where you're going to fall on this no-go matrix. It's like you literally can do this. Now, it sounds like most of us haven't had like these little graphics in front of us when we're making a decision, and we're actually doing those. but these are very good for using them that way, and also for making the case, if you have to make the case internally to team members, your board, staff members, about why we're doing this and why we're considering this. It's good to have these, just a graphical thing to be able to show what you're talking about. Any questions about that? So could you go down back in order, Tom? So these questions, these are the key questions that you want to ask yourself to populate that SWOT chart. You want to go down these and understand, and then each of the answers to this will then be placed somewhere as a strength, an opportunity, or a weakness, or a threat. It's like that is the answers to what this program represents, and its different elements will be plugged into that decision matrix, which will then help you then go to the map and say, is this a no or not go? So let's start with this. Why do you need the program? What is triggering the demand for the program? Is it what you're really saying? Is that an authentic demand? Is that something from your client base? Is that something that emerges out of your mission? Or is this something that it was funder driven? These don't necessarily have to be diametrically opposed. It could be some combination of both, but that combination of both will tell you where you should actually end up on the mission versus money kind of understanding. You don't want to drift away from your mission. So very simply, you just want to know, why do you need this program? And then what is it? How are you actually going to implement it? Who's going to be served by this? Is it, in, as stated before in one of the examples, will this help us be more comprehensive? So if you're going to consider that, then did you ask your constituents? Did you ask your participants in your program? Did you ask other stakeholders, people who understand the need of the service? Did you ask some of your frontline staff, where there's a lot of knowledge that maybe everyone isn't being privy to every day? They see the clients every day. They might have insights. How many people need this service? Do you have a way of measuring that demand? And how are you measuring that demand? How's that coming? How's that coming from? And is it anecdotally expressed by clients, or is it something that maybe you have surveys or other kinds of ways of getting client feedback where that keeps coming up? So understanding how many people would actually realistically be served by this. Now, again, as was stated before in one of these great examples, it's not always about the number of people, but it might be the quality of service that you're giving a small subset of your clients. That might be worth doing this, and it might be very aligned with your mission. It might be something you can accomplish cost effectively through partnerships or through a grant. How many people do you have the capacity to serve in a realistic understanding? I mean, if you're gonna have to shift a lot of staff around, is this worth doing? Can you scale this up? Meaning, if you find a model and you find something that is really effective, would it be possible to do more of this? And then how long will you do this? Is it worth doing something that may be opportunistic or time limited? Maybe something is particularly responsive to today, like COVID, or particular programs that I've heard in other sessions, organizations talking about being responsive to a new immigrant community or those kind of things. So maybe you don't want to do it for long, but you might want to ramp it up fast. Can you ramp this up fast, and even if so that you can really be responsive? Who else is doing similar work? Are there people that you can collaborate with? people in your same community or similarly situated communities where you could learn from? Or are there organizations where you fit in gaps in services and they could fit in this gaps in services if you had a collaboration and it didn't cost you much money? But maybe you're in a place where this service really does not exist and that it really still is connected to your mission and you might really have to do it. As we're talking to this and you could think about it, I really want you to think about these examples because we're going to come back and we really want folks to think about and bring forth examples because I think we learn most from each other. And we've heard some great things today. So what we're going to do when we come back is we want to have folks volunteer. And we're going to run through these kind of key questions, take some of those answers, put them against the SWOT analysis, and maybe and then stick them and try to make a decision about go, no go, or go, continue, or how we're going to do about that. We're actually going to do this in real time with a very brave volunteer, but you don't have to be brave. We're all very nice here, and it's gonna be a great exercise. So what we're going to do then, think about these. We're going to take a 5-minute break and we'll come back and we'll do some of these. You could think of it as program development speed dating. So we just went over these key questions that you ask yourself if you're going to either start a new program or enhance or eliminate an existing program. So these questions, these are the questions that I want you to think about, and I want folks to volunteer, someone to volunteer who wants to talk about a program they're thinking about, either a new program, something that's existing that they're thinking about some enhancement to, or one that may need to be eliminated and they're just trying to decide. And as a refresher, we take these questions and considering where we are in that that program development life cycle graph. Can you show that quickly, Tom? That program development life cycle. So considering where we are we at the beginning? And considering what the whole life cycle is going to be. We ask those questions, we're thinking about all of that. Are we in the middle where we're thinking we need to enhance this somehow? Or are we at the end, like deployment, we've seen it, we know that we need to either continue it or discontinue it. And so next slide. We're taking those answers from those questions and we're trying to make a decision about where this fits. Is this a clear winner that's really aligned with our mission and won't hurt us financially? Next slide. And so those answers to these questions go into this SWOT analysis about the strengths, weaknesses, allowing us another lens, a meta lens, to then evaluate whether we should go forward. So let's go down to these. Is there somebody that wants to volunteer? If you have a new program that you're thinking about, one that you've been running that you want to enhance, thinking about enhancing or eliminating. We had some good things volunteered. Does somebody want to kind of go over one?
I can volunteer.
Awesome.
Okay, so I guess the program that I'm thinking of, excuse me, is our food pantry. So that's one of the program. So just a little background information. The Spanish Community Center, the building where we're currently located, we've actually outgrown the space. We've received additional funding, and we've been very fortunate in introducing new programs. So we're actually considering about building or purchasing or even renting a new building. We do have a food pantry program that has been crucial during the entire pandemic. On average, before it, we were seeing about 70 to 80 families coming on a weekly basis. And even now, we're still over at 150. At the highest number, we were about 300 per week. So it's a program that's very much needed in the community, but it's run by volunteers. So one of the issues that we're facing is that we don't have the manpower to continue it. Also in the area, many other food pantries unfortunately closed because they didn't receive funding or because they also don't have the help needed. So when thinking about possibly moving to another location, the space that is also required for a food pantry program is also not there. We do have a gym right now, but if we're looking at other offices, for example, nothing compares to the area that is required to have the grocery style or to even have the refrigerators or the freezers. So we're thinking that it might be better for us to eliminate the program entirely, but that's something that we continue to go back and forth on.
Okay, so let me, can I just stop you there? So you have a decision to make whether to expand or eliminate. Is that what you're just saying?
Well, potentially, yes. Right now, it looks like we're leaning more towards eliminating the program.
But in the short run, you see a spike in demand,
correct,
or need that's coming from your community. You're perceiving it. That
right.
means there are people that you'd like to serve that you can't currently serve.
We've been able to serve everybody just because of the additional funding.
But so then when you're defining this need, is this in your service area?
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying that there are many more people outside of you who you currently serve in your service area that you'd like to be able to, but realistically, you're at your limit at your current capacity.
I mean, yeah, to some extent.
Okay. So you think you can scale this program up with a new facility?
Yes.
And do you have currently the staff? Would that require more staff to do that?
We're currently running the program with 2 part-time coordinators and volunteers. But even when we were at the height of the pandemic with 200 plus people coming in on a weekly basis, we had to pull team members from different programs to come help. And we ran into a problem with that because then everybody else was kind of falling behind because it's a multiple day operation. So we get like deliveries on Fridays, and then Mondays we start setting up, and then Tuesdays actual distribution. So that was essentially 3 different days that staff members overall were dedicating to the food pantry, and we're not meeting expectations with their own programs. And it's hard to know if volunteers are coming in on a regular basis. So
management of
we have a set plan with that.
So you are saying that if you went to this bigger model, this bigger facility, an expanded program, that is your perception, if you were going to do that long term, that there would have to be some additions to staff.
Correct, definitely.
Well, otherwise, it could be disruptive.
Right.
Now, you also mentioned similar work in your community done by folks, but it still doesn't meet the demand you're talking about.
Yes, there were other food pantries in the area that also relied on volunteers that had to shut down or that have not been able to assist as many people because of the lack of manpower. And then those families were then referred over to us.
Oh, so you got the result of the lack of capacity of them closing. So given that, do you think there's any potential in partnering with others maybe that didn't have the capacity to do it on their own? Maybe if you join forces, do you think, is that something that's conceivable to you? The possible?
We haven't fully explored that option. Just right now, we're kind of trying to stay afloat, to be honest.
So there's no collaborations that are obvious.
Not at the moment, no, aside from referrals, no.
Hey, Phil, let me
Yes.
jump in here for a second. So we got a
Absolutely.
real case story here. By the way,
Yes.
who is speaking?
Me, Sylvia.
Sylvia
Sylvia,
Chavez.
Right, sorry, because I can't see is our speaker. Thank you. So one possibility that comes to my mind is an emergency fund request to one of your already solid partners, or someone that you know that in the funding world that is very strong in food justice, food deserts, direct service. Maybe even a very large food provider that you know, like ConAgra, or some major manufacturer of food products, Bird's Eye, General Mills, somebody that you maybe have known about but haven't had a reason to approach. But the idea is an emergency grant of a very substantive amount that would allow you to get a lease on some storefront, whatever you think is appropriate. Hire the 2 to 3 people that you know is going to be needed, so that you don't drag your other folks away from their jobs.
Right.
And if it's the thing that a storefront space is not exactly right because it doesn't have refrigeration, it doesn't have clean storage, the picking of the space is a delicate matter so that it's correct.
Absolutely.
But the need is so compelling. Is it what do people think about some kind of emergency? You cobble together perhaps the leaders of the pantries who are closed, they haven't gone away, but their pantries are closed. What if you put them together on an emergency team, approached a funder for a very large grant? Is that something that would be feasible, or is it just pie in the sky?
So as she's answering, Tom, can you go up to the SWAT side? Please, Sylvia. What's your thoughts about that?
Like I said, we haven't really approached any. We received the majority of our support comes from the Northern Illinois Food Bank, and then of course we have some smaller partnerships when it comes to food donations from like local stores and businesses. But when it comes to seeking additional funding just for the program and possibly collaborating with others, that's not something that we've explored, but we're definitely open to.
Okay. So then if we were to just take your answers and put them into the SWOT analysis, and I invite anybody to say what they heard and what might be strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. So your strengths, it sounds like you've already been doing an successful program, just as a small scale. So you're experienced in it. You've got volunteers that know what they're doing. You've got staff that knows what they're doing.
Right.
And there are other strengths that you want to expound on that, or does that kind of characterize kind of why this is strong for you? It's also aligned with your mission. So I would say that's a strength of this program. Weaknesses, it sounds like you've identified capacity weaknesses, that to expand, it needs to be broader, that you would need to have dedicated staff, that it kind of pulls against folks doing their regular job. And so that might be its key weakness in having the funding necessary to expand the way that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Am I characterizing that right?
Right. Right now it's having enough people to run the program and in the space.
The opportunity, it sounds like, is to meet that need, especially in fact, in the light of other organizations in your proximity that had to close because of lack of capacity. So the opportunity, it sounds like, is in the demand.
Right.
And there is some funding that has come along with it. It's just so far without a creative solution like Tom is talking about, that funding is not sufficient to meet this thing that you want as it currently is. So the threat, it seems to me, has to do with stretching your capacity too far and draining it. That's one set of threats. It seems like not meeting this demand is a threat, because this is really destabilizing in your community to have, hungry folks.
Right.
So that's it of itself. So there's the threat. It's almost like there's a threat of letting this thing go or not doing it when there's so much need. And I can imagine that providing this is goodwill for your organization and the community. That might help you do other parts of your mission. Is that correct?
Right.
Because you can serve people better when they're not worried about their
Absolutely.
basic need. So not doing it doesn't seem, and then the threat to expanding your capacity beyond what you can do might threaten your bottom line, might threaten your existing programs if you don't watch that. Another threat could be to the morale of your staff if you're pulling them in too many directions. Tom, you said.
Well, I would just say that to wrap up this case for everyone else, reflect if Sylvia's story doesn't, jive with you, that like that your organization is experiencing something similar. You're being pulled in a very powerful direction by a real need, and the question is, what are the pluses and minuses? It's going to pull our staff from their other tasks. It's going to drain them. It will demoralize them if they can't do their job properly, but it could also demoralize them if we don't address this pressing need and folk go hungry.
That's
so this
right.
This is for real.
And can you go up to the next one, the map for a second, as you're talking about this, Tom?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So that the opportunity lands in the revenue contributors. If the opportunity can yield a new substantive grant, then that places us in the solid blue on the upper left. It certainly is in the solid blue on the right, that it is very consistent with your mission. You've already been doing this great service. This is just more intense, more focused, and now you have a physical space. Remember, folks, when you have a physical space for something, that all of a sudden becomes the dog that wags the tail.
Absolutely.
And to run a space, if it's going to be just a food space or a pantry space or something that is really driven by this particular need of food and nutrition, does it have a kitchen? Does it have the storage? Is it clean? It does have, does it have a place for the truck to back up? Is it that kind of a space? When you operate a space like that, it is going to drive a lot of things for you.
And there'll be costs. There'll be unanticipated costs, maybe around maintenance, what kind of equipment you might need in there.
Yeah.
A lot of things can emerge when you go to a different type of a scale.
However, in this instance, if your organization can respond quickly and announce within a timely manner that you are opening some way, whether it's its own space or some other and clever, maybe it's a church community room that already has a freezer and storage, some clever way to respond to this pressing need, that's a big win for your organization. And you can justifiably brag on that in terms of building your base and getting more funding in the future, that you were able to nimbly respond and still come out strong because you did it in a clever, measured, responsible way. So thank you.
So what does it sound like, Tom? It sounds like to me, Sylvia, that the only thing that keeps this from being a clear winner are the things that you have to deal with around the funding of it, those costs. And those will mitigate then the potential distractions of staff and time and that kind of thing. So I think you're almost got a really clear winner in the sense that you can solve that kind of revenue contribution, collaboration, that resource gap problem it sounds like it on the mission side, it's very high. So that's really interesting. And I love this because we show a graph like this. It's to help your thinking, is to help you sell it to other collaborators inside your organization and out. But really few things are so clearly winners that you don't have to think about it. It's about the weighing of the stuff that lets an executive like you make a decision.
And
So,
before we move on to our next case, I'd like the other attendees to weigh in chat. And should Sylvia and her organization provide this service? Yes, no. Provide your reasoning, and then you're helping your colleague with her own planning process. So
absolutely, and I would even go maybe one step further. You're helping your colleague. Maybe there's another way to help your colleague as you hear the examples. Maybe there's a way to collaborate or help them with that, or point them to a resource that you know about. Because this is a really critical thing in our time now. And Sylvia, I really want to thank you for sharing and for what you all are doing. I mean, it's really important work, and we all understand that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So is there another somebody else who wants to step up? You see, it's painless. Did that hurt, Sylvia? So please, we can all learn from each other. All right, Lorena, can you unmute Lorena?
Hi,
Hello.
how are you?
Good.
Did you want me to elaborate on my comments?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Are you willing to get in the barrel?
Of course, yeah. I think after hearing Sylvia's situation, I think staff burnout is a really big deal. And especially if you have really great talent on your team that can really help you evolve your programs in a way to reach the max capacity of the audience you're trying to reach. I would make a plan to, maybe relaunch a new plan or relaunch a new connection so that, you avoid any kind of staff burnout, because then, things can really get tricky and fall through the cracks with burnout. So that's just my personal opinion.
All right. All right. Did you have a program idea or something that you're thinking about at your organization that maybe you want to consider?
Oh my gosh, I have so many.
All right, give us one.
So one that I'm currently working on, I've actually been working on for almost 3 years. It's a volunteer program around financial education. So the volunteer program is called the Credit Mentor Program. And I feel like I've struggled to complete it. I feel like I put all the pieces in place, and then because we're such a large organization, you have to wait, in my case, for other people to, do something like in our CRM system, for example. And, if you don't stay on top of them, then it kind of falls off. So that's kind of what happened to me. I didn't really stay on top of them. And a year, I would say more like 8 months passed. And I didn't get anything really done. And yeah, it's a little bit hard when you have other key holders and in place that are also swamped with so much work. So that's just my situation.
So the program, in terms of what triggered the demand from it? Why do you want to provide these kind of services to your clients?
Sure. So we just have a very, small capacity to meet the need. We have lots of people that are hungry to learn about their credits, to get a copy of their credit report, to build credit, to dispute credit. And so I think the demand is so big, and we have so many partners that refer kind of in a constant basis that we fall behind with our clients. So the program concept came from the idea to really expand our capacity and reach more people through a very quick kind of transactional service.
So your current services that are complementary to this, I suppose. So this client, who are you serving? Is this a subset of your clients, or is this the?
That's a great question.
Because it sounds like you asked some of them somehow, or you're getting feedback from them that they need this.
Yes, so we have a intake team who is the one that's basically processing all the applications. They're the ones getting the phone calls. And so they have access to like coach or counselor calendars. And so our coaches or our counselors sometimes have their calendars booked 3 months out. And so, you know, because we don't want to burn out our coaches or our counselors, we have kind of strict guidelines in place so that, you know, they keep themselves and their mental health okay and safe, so that they could continue to do this really powerful and impactful work. So that's kind of how that works and how that flows. We have a team that just kind of sends us folks. And then at one point it's like, you guys, like, we're way behind. We have 85 people on a list that need to be seen, and everyone is booked 3 months out. So what do we do?
Here's a quick question that would help, I think, the strategy part. So if I understand you correctly, Lorena, what the growing need here is around credit status. So that, to me, when I hear that, I mean your ability to purchase a home, your ability to stay in your house if you're renting. So like your income is flowing in. Are you banked or unbanked? So is there a bank that's approximate to your community? Is it a friendly bank? Are people cognizant or comfortable going to this bank and opening an account? Or they're not sure and they're going to the payday loan store because they're not sure if they're welcome at the bank. There's all that is in my mind when I hear you say credit.
Yes.
Are these young families? Are these older families, you know, with children of high school age? So I have many questions. So the question for you and the rest of our attendees is, what data does Lorena and the Resurrection Project need to go forward? Is it something like numbers of homeowners in the Pilsen community, rent burden? Like you could say, Lorena, that of the people that the Resurrection Project serves, 82% of them are rent burdened, and you know that how? You know what I'm saying? Is that a useful question?
Is that in the intake process currently? Because it sounds like that's what the intake process was driving some of this. So it must be data in there that's helping you make this decision.
Absolutely. And Tom, you're 100% right in everything you said. And Phillip, yes. So the intake team does collect all that data. We have it reflected on a dashboard. And so we're able to see the demographic of the people that are coming in, and majority is, you know, single moms that are coming in, or women that are leading the assets of the household. So, you know, I think majority of our clients are Spanish speaking and they're female.
Okay, so this is good data, right? So everyone attend that they were thoughtful. The Resurrection Project is thoughtful before the demand of this particular spike happened. They were thoughtful on, like, what should we know about our people? Not just the people who are coming into the door and ringing our phones, but generally, what do we have to know about kind of our community, our, 60618 or whatever our census tracts are. And one of those, obviously, in these crazy times is rent burden, what number of families own their properties, what's the property tax situation like in the communities you serve? Is it going up? I mean, the pressure of gentrification is actually becomes a relevant factor here. So I know you guys know a lot of that.
Yes.
And the question is, can we make all that stuff available to you and the other decision makers so that you can, without having to get a PhD, figure it out? That's what I'm saying. So do you think you have the data that you need to move forward, is what I'm saying?
I think that's a great question. And over time, we've collected a lot of data. So I feel like we do. But when I decided to propose this program to the leadership team, it was based off the feedback of the current coaches and counselors that, at least 80% of their clients have credit related situations or need some sort of credit, advice or mentoring. So I think that's the data points that drove the program. So I'm not sure if there's a difference between the data points or how, the decision, because the program is still somewhat up and running, but it's, it's shaky. It's not like strong yet. And so,
Right.
Can I shift a little bit? So what does it need to be strong?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it just needs a little bit more structure, because right now, there's just different systems in place that are not connected to our big system, but there were systems that I had to create on the side to make things work. And so I think that the systems that I created might not be the best systems so far, I think I've, would like it to all go into one place, but now I'm, getting data from one place and then manually entering it into another place to reflect it. So, that is time consuming. So there's just things like that, make the program a little bit shaky where, you fall behind and putting the data in and implementing it into the other system. So, just things like that.
So it seems like there's one of the opportunities here, again, is not too dissimilar from Sylvia's story of a pressing, growing need, real time, that is pulling on your staff. As you're saying, it's sending SOSs to the leadership, like, how do we handle this? How do we handle this? So many of our people are in debt, or there could be evicted even. If they, so the employment status, the real-time employment status of your people is relevant here, because the factory 2 miles away, it got closed for COVID. So we know that 100 of our families, breadwinners, are from that factory. So that's going to kill our credit. That's going to have so you kind of know all these things, causing you to put together some kind of emergency briefing for your senior management that says, just a reminder, we know our situation is dire. Here's what we know about our people. And then, some of these statistics that you've already cited, 80% of this, rent burden of that. And if we do nothing, so this is kind of, the internal marketing that Phil has earlier alluded to build your case to your bosses. You're saying the opportunity is grave. Here are the numbers. The red lights are flashing. You know what I'm saying? The submarine is sinking. There's the sense of urgency. And maybe you even have a testimony from one or two of the women that you referenced, the moms.
Yes.
And here's Joanna from 19th Street. Here's a paragraph from her, and she says, "I'm this close to being evicted. My credit card is maxed out. Her story. I need help. I either need a bank account, whatever her story is." And you have one or two of those compelling paragraphs, and then comes your solution. The solution is, we will now have a new desk at the front door of our building called credit check, or there's a big dollar sign, a peso sign or whatever, something that's very visible. And we're going to train all our Pilsen staffers on how to refer their clients, however they are interacting, whether they're from the housing side or the school side or the property development side. However you encounter folk, you're now encouraged to ask them about their debt status or credit issues. And if there is, just send them to the person sitting at that desk. And
Lorena, you're in the presence of a person I call a visionary. He is a genius at doing this kind of thing. And as you listen to him, and I know you've thought about their program, have you thought about, are there potential partners, like organizations that might do something or that is complementary to your vision that might help you smooth this way, the way of this a little bit? Have you thought about it that way?
Yes, and Tom, I think those were incredible solutions that you just brought to the
I mean,
table
you can do
just
that all
right
day.
now.
You can do
And
it all day.
and Philip, yes, we do have partnerships with other organizations that we refer to when we're just really that swamped and we can't take on any new clients.
And I would
Hmm.
say,
And that's been like a short-term solution for us.
right, so here's, again, another opportunity, again, sort of like the case before.
Can you slide up to
and-
the SWOT a minute? That SWOT slide. I'm sorry.
The opportunity would be, again, to review your current partners and partners that you haven't approached, like the local bank, whoever they are. Byline Bank, by the way, is expanding dramatically into this market. I don't know if they have a branch by you, but you could approach a bank to say, here's the deal. We want to work with you to bring more clients, more accounts, if you will, from our community into your bank. And your bank is already here, and it's already shown some evidence of Spanish familiarity, and they're already, advertising in the Spanish language media. So you might have a banking partner in mind. And here's the deal: we want X number of dollars to set up this financial literacy counseling program. We want to open up new accounts with you. So we're going to have, you can have a guy sitting in our lobby with our guy over there at the $ desk. And so we're ready to work with you in this imaginative way to get more of our people in good financial health and eventually get them banked. And you could be the bank of choice if you do the following.
Now that's an excellent idea, Tom, and I've seen that one implemented by a guy. I don't know if you know Otis Monroe, and he did that with banks in Inglewood. And the carrot for the bank is new deposits, new depositors, new clients, and so setting up that system. And then they also did things like seminars with groups of newly banked folks. So it became a win-win for this bank in Inglewood trying to, get more deposits and more depositors and get some of this unbanked participation in their bank. And then it helped the nonprofit with their clients, giving them capacities they couldn't have, so you can move forward. It's very hard to function in this economy if you don't have a bank. So
yeah, so the Monroe, so Otis has got his own foundation. He does a lot of work, as Phil says, in financial literacy, but he also does a lot of work around expungement. He works with the Cook County prosecutor and other law enforcement people to do like almost expungement fairs, that kind of thing. Like a day where a person with a record can come into this space and essentially get everything done in one crazy series of events, because there's someone from the prosecutor's office, there's someone from the sheriff's office, you know what I mean? There's people from justice service organizations. So Otis would be possibly a good connection for you.
Absolutely, and we could help you make that connection if you would like to do that.
That would be wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think so. Let's get some weigh-in from the other attendees. Other thoughts that you might share with your colleague here. How to make this financial literacy thing happen for her, how to deal with this rent burden. Maybe other people in other communities are experiencing the same thing. Your people are unbanked, they're stressed out, danger of eviction. Any thoughts that you want to just throw it in the chat, and there's no wrong answers. Well, you can certainly put them into chat at any time.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's head to the next point, Phil.
So let's look at what we just saw here. There were some very striking similarities from my perspective. In here, you had not funder-driven kind of demand and impetus for the program, but they're starting it because of needs that have emerged, needs they see. These are truly responsive, both of them, in the truest sense. They're responsive to an emerging and growing community need. Both organizations seem to have some experience, good experience in doing it, so they're thinking about scaling up or enhancing. And both of them face critical decisions to make about how to go forward. And some of them might include collaborations and other things. So I'm interested to hear what other people might have thought. If those examples bring to mind something that they're going through, and then you can say that, I'd definitely love to hear from someone. And what brings other folks on the line, and what did these things bring up for you that might be relevant to a program idea that you're thinking about expanding, starting, or eliminating? You don't have, if you don't want to type, you don't have to be shy. Just wave your hand and we'll give you the microphone.
I guess the question that I have too is, for example, because we're actually going through this process ourselves, trying to evaluate and assess different programs, but we're doing this internally. Would it be helpful to do this with the board, or would it be helpful to have two different processes going on at the same time? How would you suggest we go about it?
Well, I think that you want your internal your team for you to kind of make your case internally. So you kind of get your ducks in a row. And if you kind of really understand that you want to go forward with it, that you have a lot of data, that you've done a SWOT analysis and can kind of present that, you've kind of already looked at the decision points in that map, you've answered a lot of the questions for yourself. So if you're there where you think it's solid, there's pieces we might have to get or whatever, I think that if it's a strong enough idea, you start with your team and then give it to the board. If the board has particular expertise or people on it that you think might be good in the development process to figure out some of those gaps in knowledge or help you strategize, or they're just a good ally, you might want to have one of them in a pre-meeting to get them on board so that they can be their advocate, a peer-to-peer advocate with other board members, if you think there might be something to be concerned about or things they might help translate. Does that make any sense?
Yes, thanks.
Anyone else? I thought that was good. That comes up a lot. You're often doing this internal sales. And again, I want to stress, I think the graphs that we had, the map, that SWOT analysis box, the program development box, and then plugging those numbers in, those questions that are illuminated that we keep going over are all very practical kind of things to consider in your thinking, but also in presenting, because a lot of times visual kind of aids are good in these contests for convincing a board or group of decision makers. I think they're very practical tools that you can take straight off of here and implement and use. And I'm hoping you all do that. So we're getting close to the end now. So again, I think if there's any, are there any final kind of insights, anything that's anyone saw out of what was in here. If bearing that, just put it in the chat. I think, Tom, I think next slide.
So we had decided we would wanted to make some time for small group work. I think we'd like to try that in just the little bit of time remaining. What we'd like to do is to send you into small groups of maybe 5 people each, and just brainstorm on one idea that someone might have for a new program, and convene a little planning team, like help each other with that idea, and then we'll have a quick report back, and then we'll be done.
Sounds good.
So let's try that, and now you can all be in the program labs together.
So just join your groups.
Let's give it a shot. Okay, welcome back to the main session. We'd like now to move to each of the groups. There were, I believe, four rooms at the end of the day.
We talked about NHTSA's idea to help undocumented folks create their own businesses, which is really important. And we just talked about how, it's really important now, especially during COVID. And we talked about there's a really high need for that. And I shared like our resource, and basically that, and he had a really good acronym. You should share your acronym of ESO. You should share it. It had a really good idea of how to promote it.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna mute myself. That was it.
Well, that was awesome. And next group.
Oh yes, we talked about the holistic service, because there were so many good ideas I learned today, but mostly we thought it's individual, the internal growth, but we didn't think about balanced external and internal growth, to empower program itself and the community and the clients we serve. So to do that, the one of organizations have the entire service, which our clients need. So it's better to build a partnership with the strong partnership with other organizations, especially the organization we don't have such a service. And if we narrow down the service, then the program may grow vertically with expertise, but it doesn't grow horizontally to serve more people. So if we can have idea to balance between qualitative service and quantitative service, that's to empower the program itself. I don't know so whether I explained pretty much what we talked, and the participants talked about the community navigators, who work for housing program and the immigration service both. Absolutely, the both program areas mutually complement, although just only one community navigators work. So it's very beneficial too. We talked about that.
Awesome. Thank you very much for those insights. All right, and the last group, group 4. Would somebody like to share?
I don't know if it's us. Was it us?
Yes,
I'm not
share.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we basically spoke more about the issues that a lot of organizations are encountering right now. For instance, organizations that they're trying to hire new paralegals, or they're trying to expand their programs, but the funding is not there, or issues like right now, finding the right people to because there's so much demand, in this regards. So that was one of the main themes about our group. Basically, the issues of, perhaps there's funding out there, but at the same time, trying to find the right people that even spaces, nowadays with a pandemic. So very
Absolutely.
difficult to, like you want, perhaps you need the people you want to bring more, people to help out, that community. But if you don't have the spaces and with the pandemic, so all of these issues are, um, are preventing organizations from perhaps expanding, even though some of them might have good ideas.
Yeah, we're in serious times, and it's important to collaborate and be creative and nimble, as Tom talked about before. And I think we've heard so many examples of that. We're going to wrap up now, and while we're talking, please, before you leave, link to the evaluation. The evaluation really helps us design programs so that we can give you the information you need and be better presenters and better what we do. We've got upcoming workshops. The 24th of February, the 3rd of March, and the 10th of March. You will get this presentation in your email, and you'll get the chat. And we hope to see you at those upcoming workshops. We thank you so much for your participation and your input. You help all of us by enriching us with your stories. And thank you very much, Tom.
You're welcome. As we sign off today, if you want to put some word into the chat that describes your feeling, that would be great. I'll start by saying all power to the people all the time. Boom, that's all I got to say.
And really, if you like the workshop, you want to see more of these kind of things, please put that in there. And thank you so much for your participation. And let's then have a great day. Have a great day out there doing good for our community.